Dictators love religion. It's a powerful tool to marshal public support and expand governmental control. Vladimir Putin is an excellent example of a cynical politician who exploits religion for his own political gain. Since he became president in the year 2000, he has strategically appealed time and again to the Russian Orthodox Church to strengthen his own power. He has highlighted it in public speeches. He has presented himself time and again as a defender of traditional Christian morality, including legislative restrictions on divorce, opposing homosexuality, and supporting the traditional family. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? He also has used state funds to rebuild churches that were razed to the ground under communism and to restore churches like St. Isaac's in St. Petersburg, which had become a museum under communism. He has also used the Russian Orthodox Church to justify his own imperialist ambitions, including appealing to a unifying Christian narrative of Orthodox Christianity to justify his annexation of Crimea and his ongoing war in Ukraine. His photo ops with the Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill and participation in traditional liturgical ceremonies have cemented his role as a great defender of the Russian Orthodox faith, while effectively neutering the Russian Orthodox Church from being a critical prophetic witness against anything that Putin might choose to do. Now, Donald Trump has been attempting to follow the same basic playbook in the West for 10 years, although he has been greatly hampered and slowed in his progress by the relative robustness of democratic and independent institutions in the United States, including an independent judiciary and congressional branch or legislative branch of government. But appealing to traditional conservative Christians and granting them a promised favored status in a Trump governed state is a way of him doing something very similar to what Putin has done very effectively in Russia. And as a result, Trump's supporters have become more and more overt in their own flirtation with Christian nationalism, an attempt to establish a Christian government and society from the top down. I've been keeping an eye on Frank Turek for a while now because he is one of the two or three most influential Christian apologists today. He's got a very large bully pulpit in conservative evangelical Christianity, and he has also been an overt supporter of MAGA Christianity, not just conservative or Republican values, but straight up MAGA Christianity. For example, one of his good friends is Charlie Kirk. Now, Turek posted this tweet yesterday. Should Christianity be taught in public schools? First thing to note here is I think there is a classic case here, maybe of plausible deniability. Um, it's a vague question. What does it mean to be taught in public schools? And one way to interpret this is that he's just asking, should Christianity be addressed as a topic within public school curricula? And of course, the answer to that is yes, obviously it should. Christianity is a part of the history of the country and an ongoing uh, factor within, for example, cultural and social and political questions. It's just a reality that Christianity is part of that dialogue, and you need to discuss it just like you would discuss other religions and their historic and contemporary role within American life, whether it's Islam or Judaism or Mormonism. So yeah, it should be taught in that sense, but nobody questions that. So honestly, that really isn't the point of this question at all. The question rather is this: should Christianity be taught as the unifying true narrative of reality in public schools? In other words, should public schools be treated as Christian schools? That's the real meaning here. This is a Christian nationalist tweet, flirting perhaps with some degree of plausible deniability given the superficial ambiguity of the question. But again, any credible reading of what he's really asking here is that it is clearly a nationalist question. Note that typical Turek tweet might have 100, 120 likes and maybe 20 or 30 or 40 retweets. But in this case, this question gets over 4,000 likes and 300, almost 300 retweets and over 1,000 comments. Now, this suggests to me, among other things, that there are a lot of people that agree with Frank Turek that Christianity should be taught as a unifying true narrative within public schools so that public schools effectively become Christian schools. And this, I believe, is a matter that should concern everybody who believes in a free, independent society. Now, I want to deal with just two kind of questions that people might have or responses that they might have to highlighting this tweet as specifically concerning. The first response somebody might have is to say, he's just asking a question. You're making too much of it. He's not even saying, yes, he agrees with the question. He's just asking the question itself. That misses the point that rhetorically, what you functionally do by asking a question is by implication, you open that up as a legitimate point of discussion. For example, if you were to say, could husbands be allowed to legally, physically hit their wives? And if somebody were to say, it's how dare you ask that question? You can't just say, I'm just asking the question. I'm not endorsing an answer. By asking the question, you are normalizing as a legitimate point of debate whether husbands should be able to physically beat their wives. If you ask, should white people be able to own black people as slaves? You can't just say, I'm just asking the question, because by asking that question, you are already suggesting by implication that this should be a question discussed and debated. If you ask, should Christianity be the true unifying narrative that is accepted in public schools, you are normalizing whether Christian nationalism should be accepted as true. You are already moving the discussion point within civil society to be open to Christian nationalism and Christian schools or public schools being baptized as Christian schools. That is significant, and that is something you should definitely be concerned with. Now, the second thing that somebody might say is, it's just a single tweet, though. Even if he is kind of normalizing it in this tweet, it's just one tweet. But it's not just one tweet. Look at Turek's profile. Look at the tweets he regularly produces. Look at the videos he produces. And look at all the other people who are normalizing similar Christian nationalist type framing. I just noted in a recent video critiquing Trent Horn that he raised criticisms about Islam. Now, in his video, he raised concerns about whether Islam should be considered a violent or dangerous ideology and such that immigration of Muslims into the United States should be restricted or prevented. And there was an important ambiguity in how Trent Horn discussed this because he didn't explicitly say that Islam in its essence is dangerous. It was possible that he was saying some expressions of Islam are dangerous. That still raised the question of what he was implying, suggesting by implication is that immigration authorities should be discerning what kind of Islam a Muslim holds before they allow them to immigrate into the country. And the very ambiguity of Trent's phrasing, given especially that Trent is a very precise, clear thinker, I'm going to assume that he's aware of ambiguity when he presents it. And I'm going to assume, because of that, that he has reasons for stating things in an ambiguous way when they could have been clarified. So, what this does is it opens up within Trent's discourse the space to consider restricting Muslims coming into the United States. And I raised this as a concern. Now, it's interesting, somebody in the comments to that video said, well, the difference is that Christianity is true. So, yes, Christians should be able to restrict Muslims coming into the country because it's a false and dangerous religion, but Christianity is true. That, again, is already assuming you have a functionally Christian government that is then enforcing its particular interpretation of a just and good society upon all members of that society. That is just further evidence that the space of the plausibility space is shifting and that Christians, by and large, are becoming more and more open to Christian nationalist framing and discourse. To conclude, I can put it in the terms of William James. So William James, 130 years ago, when he talked in his famous essay on the will to believe, he talked about particular views of reality that are considered live options for people. There are many ways of interpreting reality. We don't consider credible or plausible. They're beyond the plausibility space for us. So they're not live options. But when something moves into the plausibility space for you, you may not yet accept it as true, but you're now significantly open to its being true. You're willing to debate it seriously and consider it seriously. And I'm seeing, at the very least, Christian nationalism is increasingly among conservative evangelical Christian leaders being considered in the plausibility space. And some, like Turek, I believe, have gone further than that. They themselves, I believe Turek is a type of Christian nationalist, but he's working to increase the plausibility space of Christian nationalism as a point of debate and discourse within society. And simple tweets like this are a way of tilling the ground for his followers and his constituency to themselves become open to the language and framing of Christian nationalism. And again, for anybody who is concerned about an established religion and a potential dictator, somebody who has a low value for democratic institutions, exploiting religion in much the way that someone like Putin has exploited the Russian Orthodox Church, this ought to be very concerning for all of us.